Hey, this is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week's guest is the owner of Procabulary, Mark England. This is one of my favorite shows to date. I grew up hearing that we are what we believe, we are what we think. A few years ago, I came across kind of a formula that explains that, where it shows that we have a circumstance in our life that triggers a thought. That thought triggers an emotion. The emotion triggers a behavior. The behavior triggers a result. And so if you can grow some awareness around that initial thought and not become so reactive to the circumstances you have in life, then you have more control over the results that you get in life. What Mark is doing at Procabulary is literally training us to rewire the way that we speak outwardly as well as inwardly. We go into depth about things he calls conflict language, negations, and soft talk, things that we all use, how to identify those, and how to translate those into more positive and effective communication, whether it be to someone else or to yourself. I had some huge aha moments for myself personally, and I hope you will too. Enjoy the show. Hey, this is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. I'm here with the owner of Procabulary, Mark England. Mark, thank you so much for making some time to do this with me tonight, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mike. I've been looking forward to this. You have a lot of my friends are big fans of your show, so yeah.
Awesome, man. Well,
very
I'm
cool.
Looking forward to it as well. Like I told you, I began the course, and I'm just fascinated with it, and it kind of it fell by the wayside with everything I've had going on this summer. But it's what you're teaching is so important, and so the goal for this show, I want to explore how we use language in general, how that shapes our stories and our beliefs, especially surrounding nutrition, right? Nutrition is something that everyone does, right? Everyone is involved in. And I want to explore how we can upgrade our language to make better nutrition choices, to improve our relationship with food in general, and help any listeners of this show reach their goals faster. Sound good?
Sounds great. I know where to go with that. Identity, man. Straight to it.
Awesome. So let's start here. Why does language matter? Why does it matter what we say to someone else, right? How do you define language, and why does it matter?
Okay, two very good questions. We define language. So when I speak about language as our internal and our external dialogue. And most people would agree that language is partially influential or possibly very influential in how someone feels about themselves, how someone sees themselves, and how someone goes about interacting with their outside world, with the people in their lives. Most people listening to this show had at least one thought and spoke at least one sentence yesterday, and they very likely did that today. And if all things go according to expectations, they'll be doing that tomorrow. And when I get the chance to share this message that has been personally transformational is a weak word in comparison to what it's done for me on my own side of the street, and also what I've witnessed in Procabulary's clients. Language is magical. When I say abracadabra, Mike, what do you immediately think of?
Well, a Harry Potter spell where I think it kills someone. It's not abracadabra, it's something like that, but that's what I think.
I've had the opportunity to travel the world and share and present these aspects of language and how they influence people in a variety of different environments. And everyone that I've posed that question to about abracadabra, they all go to magic, some sort of magic, whether it's Harry Potter or it's a magic hat with a rabbit coming out of it. few people go to Steve Miller Band, and it's still magic. And there's a lot more to language than those things. Abracadabra, Mike, is Aramaic, and it translates to with my word I create, or with my word I influence. Now, what do we influence? What do we create? What do we influence with our words? And this is a specific conversation that goes into identity, and it's also a general conversation. So with our language, we influence what we envision, how we see ourselves, also known as our imagination. With our language, we influence our emotions and our feelings. With our language, we influence, this is very important as far as, in my personal and professional opinion, the nutritional side of this conversation. We influence how and where we breathe. We'll get more to that in a moment. And we also influence our physicality, our physical body. So let me make this very easy for everyone to relate to. I was coaching a young man. This was 3.5, 4 years ago. And I was brought in to do a language training for a group of sales individuals. And we went in and did the presentations we normally do and some individual coaching. And I was sitting with this young man, and he was talking about his career. And this is what he said, and this is what he did. He said, "Mark, I can't keep focusing on my past." And he turned around just like that, about 3 times faster than I did right there. And Mike, I'm looking right at him, right? It's just he and I in the room, 2 chairs. And of course I saw it. He didn't, though. And I asked him, I said, you just turned around and looked behind you, right? And he stopped, and it kind of shocked him. And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, really." "Did you see anything?" Again, he had to stop and think. "Yeah, I did. I saw myself, and I was all bound up and in chains." And we talked about what he was feeling. So our emotions and feelings. He was anxious, a little bit nervous, and angry. And guess where he was breathing? Down deep into his abdomen, where he was nice and relaxed and focused on where he was going, or up in his chest, upper chest, in a stress response, in his chest. So with that statement, that sentence, which was for him a mental prison sentence, "I can't keep focusing on my past," he activated 4 main aspects of how people experience themselves immediately. He saw himself in a certain way. He created the feelings, the anxiety, the fear. His physical body got involved, and he trapped his chest. It trapped his breathing in his upper chest, which over time, if someone sees themselves that way, and they repeatedly create these certain kinds of feelings for themselves, and they're breathing up, shallow breathing, labored breathing, also known as coastal breathing, they will influence how they see themselves, their identity. And we did a TED Talk recently about this, about the fluid nature of identity versus the current definition of identity. So the current definition of identity, Mike, is the fact of being who or what a person is. So it's stagnant, it's stale, it's a just matter of fact. That's the way I am. Why make any kinds of adjustments to my lifestyle, change anything around? Just, I was pretty much born this way. It's a sneaky definition, and it's very disempowering. And so we propose that, well, let me ask you this. This is a simple question. Do you see yourself differently in any way than you did 20 years ago?
100%.
100%. So what does that tell you? And guess what? Everybody says the same thing. What does that tell us about identity? Is it a static, factual thing like the definition implies, or is it more of a process that we have influence, a lot of influence in?
Absolutely, something that we have influence over.
The athletes that you see make the most gains in an area of their physical development, whether it would be weight loss or personal reps or some kind of performance athletics. I know you just ran with a guy who was, how far did he go?
206 miles.
That's amazing. With the athletes that you coach, what is as far as the way they think, I'm sure you've noticed a pattern in the people that get the most out of themselves. What's the most common denominator in how they use their language, how they think, how they speak?
It's exactly what you're talking about. They think that any skill or trait is malleable, and with work and attention and effort, they can change anything about themselves, whether it be mindset or how many muscle ups they can do or nutritional choices or relationships. They think that they have influence over everything.
Big time. And by seeing themselves that way, they're more likely to repeatedly work at themselves or work on themselves, as opposed to saying, I'm never going to get this anyway, and I'll just stop.
Right.
We have a local networking hub here in Richmond, and they're doing some very, very cool work. So each hub is connected to a nonprofit, and I met the owner recently, really liked the guy. And so he's had me come in and do 15-minute presentations for them about language and about identity. And as a very interesting and very tangible drill, I have them write down 2 sentences. So the first statement is, they have a lot of confidence. They write down that statement.
They write down, I have a lot of confidence.
They have. So that's the statement. They have a lot of confidence. And then they write down this statement. They have developed a lot of confidence.
Wow.
And yes, you know exactly where this goes. And so I asked them, what's the difference for you in your experience of yourself when you write down those 2 statements? And everybody says the same thing. Well, the first statement, it puts them over there, and that's the way they were born, and well, whoops, would have been nice. And the other one puts them in a process of how they've developed it, how they've gotten more confident. What have they done? So it begets questions, powerful questions. How did they do that? What did they do? What was their approach? Now, what am I doing? Could I do that too? As opposed to killing the conversation before it even gets started. And so there are obvious ways that language scripts a victim-centric mentality, and we go into that in detail in the course. And then there's more subtle ways, and that's one of the more subtle ways that it does. We can definitely go into the ways that people stress themselves out with language. I'm very happy to talk about that. And I do so from, this is important to note. I was a teacher before I got involved in this. I was an elementary school sports PE teacher. Mm-hmm. And so when I present this material or I coach, I come at it with or from that particular position as this is simply an education issue. Simply that. Has nothing to do with intelligence. Most people's education about their language comes down to 3 static things, which is spelling, grammar, and definitions, which is what I got in school. None of those 3 things address how my language is influencing my identity and what my identity is built of, and how much how I see myself, how I feel about myself, how I'm breathing and how I'm moving play into the building and the development of my identity, of my character, which in turn informs everything.
What is conflict and architect language, and where do we develop both of these?
Okay.
Or where do we develop the type of language that we speak in?
Good question. Where we develop it, we look at language as an inheritance. Okay, so it is an ongoing process of evolution. Obviously, people that were speaking English in the 1600s, it sounds a lot different than what we're using today. So it's this ongoing evolution of a way to communicate, a way to tell a story. And as far as conflict language and architect language is concerned, I think about that frequently. What came first, the chicken or the egg? And as far as conflict language is concerned, there are, and this is coming from having worked with, and when I mean worked, coached over 4,000 individual people in 1 hour one-on-one settings, and I've given about 425 professional presentations. I've been doing this full-time for a decade. And in that 10 years, I've paid very close attention to what my clients have been saying and how their words have been influencing them. And I've taken notes. And what I've found is that all of my clients, and this includes me as well, my internal conflicts, problems, hangups, and issues are all coming from one, or most of the time it's a combination of 3 pillars of a certain way of speaking. And conflict language, it's an unconscious usage of certain types of language that create worst case scenarios, victim perpetrator mental imagery, and tremendous amounts of indecision. And in that space, people stall, people stagnate. Okay, they talk themselves out of essentially staying in the game. And they're very common. We hear them all the time. Okay, so one of those pillars is negation. So can'ts, don'ts, isn'ts, haven'ts, hasn'ts, shouldn'ts, nots. Those are all negation keywords. And those are the words that people use to script those worst case scenarios. Here's some examples. I don't want to keep messing up in practice. Common thought. You've likely heard it. Now, what did I just do when I said that? Yes, of course, my intention is to have a beneficial training session. But what did I do? I just envisioned the worst case scenario. Man, I really don't want everyone to know that I'm not all that well prepared. Don't not. What did I just do? I made a picture of my greatest fear, me being found out as a potential phony. And even though these people are on some of the most prestigious elite teams of any kind of sporting event, and we do half of our business in performance athletics. Okay, so high level yoga, CrossFit. We coach a couple of Olympians, and these are a lot of the common everyday death by 1,000 type of death by 1,000 cut type of thoughts.
Something that we never pay attention to, right?
You said it right there. It's the stuff. It's what's right under our nose. It's right between our ears. It's just too common to have that much of an influence, and yet it absolutely does. So negations, and it infiltrates our personal lives as well. Sweetheart, I don't want to argue with you again tonight. What did I just make a picture of? Us arguing. And guess what? What did she just make a picture of? Us arguing. As opposed to saying, I want to have a healthy conversation with you this evening and work this whole thing out. Pausing, letting the picture settle, letting our breathing drop down. We're going to touch on this. This is a very, very important point. Arguably, from what Procabulary brings to the table and your audience, the most important point is about the breath, and we'll get there. So negations, one pillar of conflict language. Then we have projections, the second pillar of conflict language. It's very inflammatory, very, very psychologically and emotionally inflammatory language. And this is what it sounds like. The key words: other people's first names, he, she, they, them, mom, dad, you, need to respect me more. She never lets me think for myself. He made me think we needed to get married. While I'm thinking about this, let's do this. I went and had some lamination cards made of conflict language statements. I'm glad I remember this. And I showed them, I went through them in the last presentation that I gave, and we can do them right now because they're all conflict language statements. And these are all statements from real living people. And these are all statements that I would assume everybody listening to this show can very much relate to. Okay, so here's a projection.
She makes me second guess myself.
What kind of mental imagery do I make? Do you make? Does anyone make when they hear or think that statement? There's two people in the picture at least, her and myself. She makes me second guess myself. So she's in the picture, I'm in the picture, she's doing something to me, I don't like it, it sends me into a stress response. Now what happens, Mike, if I've got a competition coming up and I'm thinking this 35 times throughout the day?
I mean, you become powerless.
And that's a good point too. So this is, in my opinion, and I was an athlete at one point in time. I almost went pro as a fighter and messed up my knee, smashed it all up, and thank God, because I'm a much happier person now. So I understand what going into competition with conflict language running all over the place is like, and I also understand what going into competition with a clear mind, a nice feeling and vibe, and a nice smooth breathing. I've done both of those things, so I totally get it. And you said it robs us of our power. Emotional endurance. When one of your athletes steps into competition with a full gas tank as far as their emotions are concerned, how much better do they perform?
On another level.
On another level. Very much so. Here's a good one. So this goes into our third pillar of soft talk, or excuse me, conflict language. So we had negations, projections, and soft talk.
I think it was a seeking of acceptance kind of thing.
What kind of vibe, what kind of energy does that create in you?
Very almost like ambiguous, wishy-washy.
Absolutely, because it has to. And in a very real sense, language is algorithmic. Okay, 2 + 2 = 4 for us all the time. And when I say something like that, I think it was a seeking of acceptance kind of thing. Or, I guess I'll probably sign up for the Spartan race in a few months, perhaps. If one of your clients said that to you, what would you bet their actions would be?
No chance.
Not a chance. Not a chance. They have just made it super, super hard for them to take any kind of legitimate action, and they've done it unconsciously. So that's back to the educational issue. Someone can have a large part of their mental real estate heavily invested in their success, and if they're using these kinds of language, these kinds of words and pillars of conflict language, man, is it an uphill battle. Muhammad Ali said it. He said, it's not the mountain that we climb that wears us out. It's the pebble in our shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the pebbles. Here's another soft talk loaded statement.
I guess it sounds like I am making a lot of excuses. I've heard that a million times.
Million times. And how does that person, I'm really compassionate about this with this stuff, because guess what? I've done it. Mm-hmm. And you've heard your athletes do it. And when you see the look on someone's face when they're using these kinds of words, what does it look like? Pain.
Exactly.
Conflict. Here's another one. I'm sure it has everything to do with not wanting to have a failed relationship like my parents.
Yep.
So that key word there, not. What does that do? Negation. It paints the worst case scenario of what the person does not want. Ooh, I don't want to have a failed relationship like my parents. I'm going into a stress response about it because that's how I'm thinking. And now I'm sitting next to my spouse or my girlfriend, and I'm all stressed out. And what happens when I get stressed out? I trap my breathing in my chest. And what happens when I sit or you sit or anyone sit next to someone who's really tight and tense? We pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
We have language in our language that describes this phenomenon. So have you ever heard someone say this, Mike? I've got to get this off my chest.
Yes, many
We've
times.
all heard that.
I've said
now,
it.
let's look at the words. Let's analyze the statement, the sentence. I have to get this off my chest. What is the this referring to? It's referring to tension, tightness, pressure. The breathing is trapped in the chest. Let's go clear the air. What air? The air out in the tire, out in the tires on my car? The air in the closet? No, the air in my chest, because it's stale. It's stagnant. It's stuck. And then we do. And I get to take a sigh of relief of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all done it. We've all seen people do it. It's an upper body thing. We and take a little slice off the top.
Yeah.
Breathing is trapped here. This is, and guess how people learn. It's a learned response. It's an unconscious response, and yet it's still learned. People learn to breathe in their upper chest, which makes everything hard, including high-level performance athletics, one statement at a time. And this is it. Here's a great one.
I can't let it kill me.
What did you just make a picture of?
Me dying.
Whoops. Okay, so cool. Let's translate that, because that's what we do. So we help people raise their awareness about the common everyday language that they use, get clear about what it's doing, so the mechanism, the abracadabra mechanism, and then give them options of how to think and how to speak. And very importantly, said this way, we help people have better conversations with themselves about themselves. And when that happens, people's worlds open up. All of the most successful athletes that you've ever seen and that I've ever seen, they've had to have given themselves that permission. They've had to have, on some level, got most of them on board with them deserving it. Okay, so what do? So they create that process, that lifestyle that supports them moving forward, as opposed to self-sabotaging behaviors. How many super high-level talented people have you seen? They don't let themselves win.
Yeah, more than actually make it.
And how's that happening? It's built with this.
Yeah.
So what do? I can't let it kill me. Okay. So I look at that statement and I see the can't, that's the negation keyword, and then it, which is a general projection. So what is it? It's a generalized projection. So it. I take out the it and I put in I. I can't let, or me. I can't let me kill me. What? Okay, if I can't let that happen, good, because I want to live. I can do what? I can let me build a better life. So I just went from a negation statement, life, like you said, robbing us of our power and our ability to see ourselves in a certain way, into looking at myself differently.
Mm-hmm. And how does all this start? Is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I thought about it. That's where I came in with the chicken and the egg. So it's either an expression of our general level of evolution, of our psychological, emotional, and spiritual evolution. And I use that word spiritual. I really don't know what that means. Okay. Or it was designed for a certain outcome. I'm not sure. I don't know.
And there seems to be some level of we each have a different experience in life, and we see something happening to someone else and make a judgment about how the world must be, or we have an experience ourselves and decide that it's always going to be that way, right? So there seems to be some level of learning this either from our own experience or watching the experience of others, right?
Very well said. Yes. What everyone that's listening to this podcast can rest assured of is that we're going to tell ourselves a story. We're going to tell ourselves a story about ourselves. We're going to have a conversation with ourselves about ourselves. And here's the drum roll. It's flexible because our identity is just that. It's a flexible, ongoing process. And we have the ability to diminish and minimize any kind of negative thought process that we have about ourselves, which is much, much more based in opinion than fact. I'm not good enough to be there. I was coaching someone very recently, and the guy owned a CrossFit gym, and he said, "I'm not the kind of guy that has a ponytail, and I'm not the kind of guy that has tattoos, and I'm just not the kind of guy that has a successful gym." Guess how he wore his hair? He had a ponytail.
Wow.
Guess what? Did he have tattoos? He did have tattoos. And guess what? His gym was successful. So even though those three things were active and present in his life, he was telling himself a story that he wasn't good enough to have those things, even though he had them. You can look at high level competition teams, and quite frequently there are people that are on those teams, and they're obviously good enough to be on those teams because they're on those teams, thinking they're not good enough to be on those teams, stressing themselves out, spiking their cortisol, diminishing their testosterone, and compromising their ability to perform at their highest.
I want to move into some specific strategies surrounding nutrition, but first off, I want to say the phrase "small hinges swing big doors" really comes to mind with this, right? There's the smallest little change in our language can have such a huge effect on our beliefs about ourselves and our behaviors because of that.
Tremendous.
There seems to be a huge correlation between Carol Dweck's work and a growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And then just in general, this kind of taking accountability, or the choice to take accountability for yourself rather than, as you put it, projecting onto others.
100%. That's the first time I've heard that quote about small hinges, and it's totally true. And I've got one card left, and it is that statement out of all of the cards that I just showed you.
How can I ever get over this?
Okay, just notice we'll call it drama, the drama level. Now take out one word, one small hinge, ever, and read it again.
How can I get over this? Okay. Wow.
What just happened for you?
Now it becomes a searching process, right? Like obviously there something exists of how I can get over this. And so now I just have to find it rather than feeling like a victim and, woe is me. There's no way I can ever get over this. So don't even look.
Don't even look, which brings us absolutely. So the drama level, it came down. You took out that one word. So how can I ever get over this? It's insurmountable. Take out the ever. How can I get over this? Now I'm in process. How can I? Do I know anyone that's, okay, that's interesting. 100%. Words, man. Who knew?
So in your course, you have a few different sections. So you define everything that we've just talked about. You go through defining everything. You define, including what a translation is, kind of the art of restructuring your language or upgrading your language. And you have sections like negations at home, negations at work, affirmations at home, affirmations at work. Let's do some of these in the kitchen. Right? So negations in the kitchen, et cetera, et cetera. So I've got a couple kind of common phrases that I've heard, and maybe you have some that, you can spout off the top of your head. So one is, when I'm around my friends, I always cave, and I can just never stick to my diet around my friends.
Okay, perfect. So binary language, always. That's the key word there to start unraveling that statement. So if we were having a conversation, well, which we are, I'd say always. I've always caved 100% of the time. You're just going to do it, and you've done it the whole time, every time. Well, no, not always. Okay, so sometimes. I guess yes or no. Yes, sometimes. Cool. So take out the always and put in sometimes. Now repeat that statement again, Mike.
When I'm around my friends, sometimes I cave.
Perfect. Is that more accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So if you sometimes cave when you're around your friends, you also sometimes what when you're around your friends?
Stick to your diet. Stick to my diet.
So we would make the statement in its entirety. Sometimes I stick to my diet when I'm around my friends. And the cool thing here is you can use a very powerful word here, the word because. I'll show it in the statement, and then I'll give a little bit of background. So you can because the beginning of the statement and get the outcome, and you can because the end of the statement and get the reason. So because I sometimes stick to my diet when I'm around my friends, I'm leaner. I perform better. I'm much more confident about my diet.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that do? That increases someone's energy and confidence and emotional endurance about seeing these things through. Now let's because the end of that statement. Sometimes I maintain my diet when I'm around my friends because I've got a competition coming up. Boom, period. Dr. Robert Cialdini, he wrote the book Influence, The Power of Persuasion. And they did a fascinating study with the word because. They went into a huge office that had a large copying room, so copies. And they had someone go from the back of the copy line at peak copy hours, back of the line to the front of the line and say, "Excuse me, can I get in front of you?"
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah. Yep. And the person said yes 66% of the time. So then they had the person give a why. So use the word because. They would get in front to go to the line. "Excuse me, can I get in front of you to make some copies because I'm late for the dentist?" Or if I get these because I can get these copies to my boss in his meeting if I'm out of here in 15 minutes. They went from 66% yes response to a 94% yes response. And here's where it just gets wild. They would go from the back of the line to the front of the line and say, "Excuse me, can I get in front of you to make some copies because I need to make some copies?"
Yeah.
And they got a yes 93% of the time.
Wow.
So when if you anyone listening, if you want to enliven yourself about what you're doing and remind yourself about why you're doing what you're doing, write it down in a statement. That's huge, by the way. Writing things down. Arguably the best way to clarify the mind I've come across. And this is my job. And then put becauses, strategic becauses, sometimes in the front, sometimes in the back, and watch what happens. Your mental imagery will open up, your energy will open up, and you'll start to breathe more down into your abdomen. And when people are breathing more, one of the reasons, in my opinion, and let me preface this, I am not, negation acknowledged, I am not a nutrition expert, okay? Having said that, I do eat, okay? And I pay attention to other people that eat. And I did, the first 5 years of my coaching was at a health and detoxification cleansing spa in Thailand, and I saw thousands of people. I coached thousands of people as they went through these detoxification protocols, cleansing protocols. So as you can imagine, and they had a world-class menu, and we had dietitians there. So I've been around these conversations. Okay, am I certified? No. And having said that, what I've noticed is that, and a lot of people will attest to this, when people are stressed out, they eat more. When people are breathing up in their chest, they need to satiate themselves. When someone is in a relaxed response, so
I feel like you're looking right through me. You're talking right to me.
We're all in the same boat here, man. We all think thoughts. We all use language, internal dialogue, external dialogue. We all make pictures of ourselves, little mental movies. We all create feelings. This is what we're going to do in our lives. And let's get really, really good at doing it. Because guess what? There is no ceiling. We're all going to breathe and we're all going to move our body. And I say all, generally speaking. Yes, there are, of course, anomalies and things like that. And when someone is in a stress response, breathing coastally, shallow, it's known as fight, flight, or freeze response. You've likely heard that. And 99% of the time, it's a freezing of what? Of the of the breath. So I think these thoughts throughout the day, how can I ever get over this? I'm just now getting to the point where I can actually be comfortable using her name. He made me think we needed to get married. I can't keep focusing on my past. I can't let it kill me. I guess it sounds like I'm making a lot of excuses. She makes me second guess myself. And what happens over time, dude, our breathing gets, we learn to breathe in our upper chest. It becomes home. We do not breathe that way when we're born. People, if you watch a baby breathe, they breathe in their abdomen. And then we inherit this strange way of telling ourselves a story about ourselves and the world around us, and these little micro freezes over a couple of decades, and then we've got this upper chest thing. Okay, and guess what that leads to? Upper shoulder thing. And guess what the upper breathing chest and the upper shoulder thing lead to? A tight jaw thing. Okay, and now I've got this ongoing thing that I'm very interested in. I got to do something with it, and some people did overtraining. This is huge as far as overtraining is concerned, because we've this nagging tension that we got to get out. And I used to do this. I'm talking directly about me now. The only time I felt relaxed was the 30 minutes after a really hard, intense workout. Okay. And we did not, I was a mixed martial artist in college, back in a competitive one. Back in those days, in 1997, I trained and competed from 1997 to 2002. There was no such thing as a light day. Nothing. Zero. We would wash down handfuls of rip fuel with a Twin Lab speed stacker and go bananas. And guess what? People break that way. Guess who did? Me. And guess where a lot of that was coming from? I was unable to use my language to pinpoint what was going on. I was so stressed about myself and so uncomfortable inside my own skin that I had the only way I found to relax myself was getting shit-faced drunk or hardcore exercise. And that was my college career right there. And guess what? Language. People get their story. Man, when people learn, and I've been talking about this for 10 years, pretty much nonstop. For whatever reason, there's something in the air, Mike. The people's receptivity to the conversation about their conversation with themselves is so much, it's much more open. People are like, oh yeah, okay, that does make sense. I am doing that. And you know what? I hear myself soft talking, and my God, the person that I work next to, they just will not stop gossiping. And yeah, there's a bunch of projections in there. Makes sense. So, and this is going to revolutionize a lot of things for a lot of people. There are bitter pills involved here. So, let me find one. Yeah. There we go. She makes me second guess myself. Okay. Now I'm the victim. And I'm going to sit and stew and wait for you to treat me better so I can feel better about myself. Hurry up and do it now, please. Oh, wait a minute. That's a projection. She makes me second guess myself. Take out the she, put in I, which is a translation. Technical Procabulary terminology. It's a translation from a projection to a reflection. What do I do when I look in the mirror? I see who? Me. I make me second guess myself. Is it accurate? Is it more accurate? Yeah, that's a lot more accurate. What did I just do? I just turned my language in on myself and my body responded. So when people do these translations, yes, there is the bitter pill, and also the breathing reacts. We have our conversations in Procabulary are about three things: language, identity, and breathing. And when someone goes from using a lot of conflict language to less conflict language, guess what happens? Guess what starts to happen? And this we call the descent of the breath from the chest down into the abdomen. Boom. The great transition. And it takes time. It took time for me to learn to breathe up here, and it's going to take time. It has taken time for me to learn to breathe more naturally down in my abdomen. And guess what I do? When I do breathe more naturally down there, I'm a lot more relaxed and I work out the right amount, and I'm a much better student. I can hear my coaches. I actually hear what they're saying as opposed to trying to listen to them. And it's a lot easier for me to eat the right amount. And this is where my lack of knowledge, I'm speculating here. My breathing and my thought processes, those are very, 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 I said that 3 times on purpose, that's 4, likely to influence my biochemistry. So my biochemistry is directly involved with bonding to the nutrients that I take in. So it's more than just what I take in, it's the environment that I create and then introduce the supplements or the diet into, and then the whole thing works together well, or some semblance of well, or not very well, or really, really, really well. Here's a projection. In the next 10 years, there is going to be a revolution in the way people understand and use language, and there's a very good chance that the CrossFit world is going to spearhead that. Because I love working with CrossFit people in the CrossFit game, in performance athletics, because they have their work ethic is already established. Okay, they want what they want. They want to get better. And when they understand more about the language part and they have a way to develop the way they use language and understand language and in turn their identity, and the whole thing transforms, they do it. Half of our business is in corporate training, and the other half is in performance athletics.
I had this huge aha moment when you were talking about the whole because thing. And it made me think of this conversation I had with a friend, Justin Sua. He is the sports psychologist of the Red Sox and the Browns. And he works with the best baseball players and football players on the planet, some of the best athletes on the planet. And he's talking about purpose, right? And he says, the athletes that can tie in purpose to everything they do, simple things like brushing your teeth, showing up to practice 10 minutes early, whatever it may be, they become easy and simple rather than taking willpower, right? Because they're tied to that purpose. So it just hit me like this he told me this months ago, and this is just such a practical way of actually tying in your purpose to anything and everything that's important to you. And that was amazing. I love it.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I think spells when I hear that, spelling your purpose. So spell it out. And I'm not talking about how the words, what letters go with what letters. I'm talking about the definition of a spell, the Webster's definition of a spell, which is a word or a combination of words of great influence. That's it. We've all had someone say something to us and we, oh yeah, I can do that. So we liven up, we puff up with air, we create that positive energy, and we see ourselves or see the opportunity clearly. That's a spell by definition. We've also had the opposite happen. Someone says something to us and it just sucks the life right out of us. That by definition of a spell is a spell. It's a word or a combination of words of great influence. And when people learn to practice influencing themselves into their greatness or into purpose-driven spelling, that is the next level. That is the next level of the mind game. And it's the small conversation or the ongoing, seemingly, everyday language. That's where the opportunity lies.
Let's say someone has a belief that he or she just can't stick to a diet, or they're always going to be fat or overweight or whatever it may be. How do they? Kind of what I'm getting at is I know that a lot of people have trouble with self-awareness, right? They're not even conscious of the language they're using and the thoughts that are going through their head. How do they even begin to identify the language that's hindering them, and how do they start to distill what's most important to start to translate?
World-class questions. And this does take courage. Pay attention to what hurts. Pay attention to what area of our story of ourselves hurts, and scrutinize the language. The easiest way to do that is to write it down. So, I'll never lose weight. I'll always be fat. Write that down. And because there are certain statements that need to be drawn out so they can be recognized. The lunacy of them can be seen right in front of us. My all-time favorite is I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. That's what was driving me back in the day. You want to talk about a spell? A word or a combination of words of great influence? I'm not good enough. When that and it's called a telephobia, the fear of not being good enough. This was a major component of our recent TED Talk. And what do people do with that? What do you do with it? It's one of the easiest sentences to dispel. So the definition of dispel is to cast out negativity. Write it down and then fill in what you're not good enough for. And very quickly, very, very quickly, as in a few words quickly, it becomes obvious that, wait a minute, this is much more of an opinion instead of a fact. I've been painting myself into a corner in my mind with opinions. And where do these opinions come from? Well, they kind of sound like my mom, how she talks to herself. Take out the kinda. They sound like my mom. That's my mom's language. Because guess what? We get more than blue eyes or brown eyes or eye color and hair color, and we get more than just the hardware from our parents.
Yeah.
Oh, I had somebody say this the other day, and they meant it, and the look on their face was they were almost nuts with the idea. I'm turning into my mom. She asked, "What do I do?" I said, "Well, write some of these statements down." Let's go back to that. I'm not good enough. So I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for what? I'm not good enough to be in a relationship. I'm not good. Nobody will ever love me. Great. Write that down. Does anyone love you? Yeah. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Who? Very likely they'll write 15 people without even blinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so and what's the point of that exercise? To go from to completely free all in 1 second? No, it's to just start to peel open the vice grip that concept has on people. Just a dude, you've seen it. Like somebody gets 3% improvement on a PR, they're over the moon. That's one of my favorite things about human beings. Somebody feels a little bit better about themselves. Not world champion caliber mental material for God knows what, just a little bit better. And they're like, cool, I'll take some more of that.
Right.
A little bit goes a long way.
The course is full of all of these different types of exercises on every single lesson. What is, and we're coming to the end of the discussion. What is the highest yield exercise that you would have someone do if they were just going to do one?
I'll give two pieces of advice, and you do not need to take the course for this. Okay. I very much appreciate your time, Mike, and I very much appreciate your listeners' time. Do this. Pay attention to the most indecisive people that you know, and pay very close attention to these key words. Think, like, almost like, I guess, possibly, perhaps, someday, one day, hope, and try. Those are the soft talk keywords. Those force people into this indecisive. Dude, what does prolonged bouts of indecision feel like for you? It's awful, right? And most of the time, people are keeping that ability to decide and make a choice just outside of reach with their language, with those words. So it's sometimes, most of the time, it's a lot easier to observe language usage outside of ourselves first. So find someone who's really indecisive, listen to what they say, and then start to look for that in your own language and just remove a little bit of it. Just like I said a minute ago, when someone gets a little bit better about something, so the world, it goes from flat to round. We're not talking about, Olympic caliber mindset training here yet. In one sense, we are in the long term. I'm talking about right here, right now. What can you go do tomorrow and put the couple of dots together and say, okay, yeah, I get it, man. Cool. It's that. It's cut out the soft talk. Cut out the soft talk. Cut it down by 20%, 30%, and watch what happens. Watch what happens to your imagination. Back to abracadabra. Watch what happens to your feelings and emotions. Watch what happens to your breathing, and you start to observe yourself as this process as opposed to strictly the character. When someone is solely identified as the character, as their identity, it makes changing their life that much harder. When someone sees themselves more as the process that created the character, they take on a whole new dynamism of influence in their lives. That's my advice. Focus on soft talk, and you will start the conversation about the power and the mechanism of language. And once that conversation is started, you might have to have it a couple of times, then it's alive in you.
Amazing. So now you've been practicing this, you said, for at least a decade. What is something that you personally do today to maintain the type of language that you want to maintain? Like if it's a daily habit or anything that is constant in your life.
Yes. 75, 80% of the time, I choose to speak a little bit slower than I used to. And when I say I used to, from 30 and below. And what that does is it puts me in a different relationship with my words. I'm more articulate. I say less and get more done. And I'm able to keep a conscious awareness of my breath while I'm talking. And if you notice about someone that gets really upset about something all the time, they walk in, they're like, "Oh my God, Mike, you wouldn't even believe what happened. This person said this thing to me, and then they said that, and they did this, and I was going to say like this, but I didn't think I was going to do it." You've seen that 1,000 times. What guaranteed is going on there? It's all top heavy. Okay, they're all up here. Their breathing is trapped up here. And how good of a listener are they? I mean, on top of 17 other things, besides being really tight and tense, they can't hear. You've seen this when people drive in a car. Like if someone's late, okay, and they've got a lot on their mind when they're driving, are they like this? Or are they leaned up over the steering wheel like this and they turn the music down because they can't even hear the thoughts in their own mind? Yep. That's what happens when people use language really, really fast a majority of the time. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's another thing that people can do now and experience benefit now. Slow down the rate of speech. Breathe a little bit more and enjoy the myriad of benefits.
No bullshit. I had identified that just from watching the videos throughout the course. I'm thinking, no shit. You're one of the most like You're one of the most direct speakers I've ever seen speak. It's really, really cool. And so that makes sense that you're practicing that.
Thank you. And that's done by design. I'm very much fascinated by language, by the act of speaking, by the act of listening. It's a mind-bogglingly complex action of me using air in my mouth and my jaw, and I go like this, and I create a whole cascade of events in someone else over there that cooks my mind. And so what do I do? Because it does, I appreciate it more. And because I appreciate it more, I pay more attention to it, and I contemplate it more. Because I'm contemplating what fascinates me and developing skills and things that interest me. Guess what I'm doing less of? Talking shit about people. Okay, focusing on worst case scenario stuff, blaming people for the thing that happened way back then that I keep reliving over and over and over in my mind 7 times a week when it was 22 years ago, and still blaming them. Okay, that thing happened once and I've played it in my mind 1,500 times and think they're the problem. Wait a minute. I'm more powerful than that. And we shut down or diminish the repetition of these conflict stories. And like I've been saying throughout this podcast, we start to breathe different. We talk to ourselves in a different way. And it's a magical process. I've seen it happen hundreds and hundreds of times with Procabulary students or people that pay attention to language. People don't need Procabulary to do this. It's a nice way to expedite the whole thing. And just paying more attention to how we speak. We all have gifts. We all have a lot of gifts, areas of genius that need to be brought out and kept out and developed over periods of time. And one of the most reliable ways to shut that whole process of evolving down and getting better at things that are really exciting to us is to stay stuck in little Mark stories. No one will ever really pay attention to me. Dude, I've done that. I did that for the first 30 years of my life. I hurt myself. I hurt myself with words, and it showed up in my physical body. So I've been on both sides of the street. I get it. And life is better. Life is better for me and everyone in my life, my community. Oh, well, dude, you want to talk about such a good way to add value into your community? Speak more architect language when you converse with people and watch what happens. It's called architect language for a reason. It builds. It is the language of success, the language of focus, the language of momentum, collaboration, and positive outcome. Conflict language. It's the language of gossip, of chaos, of distraction, of procrastination, indecision, and eventually failure. And knowing that creates so much empowerment in people. People want, like we started with those 2 statements, though they have a lot of confidence versus they've developed a lot of confidence. All the things that you've gotten really good at in your life, you're much more confident about them now than you were when you first started practicing them. All the things I've gotten good at, I sucked when I first started practicing. And that's exciting. So back to the conversation about process.
Mark, this has been absolutely phenomenal, man. I really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about your company as well as you?
Very cool. Very easy too. Procabulary.org. If this is interesting, if this topic is interesting to people and you want to study this and you want to get better at using your language to construct a kick-ass version of yourself, go to procabulary.org, go to courses. There's a we have 1 online course at the moment. We got 5 more coming out in the next 24 months. We are going to be a force in this genre. And watch the promo video. If you like it, here's a promotional code for $100 off. It's a $300 course, $100 code, next level. And go through the purchase function. You'll see the coupon code box, put that in, and you're in immediately.
Awesome, man. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it.
Dude, my pleasure, man.
All right. See you later.